Welcome back to part 3 of the mini quad build. I'm going to tell you what engine we've got for this today and sprinkle in a few plans and some work on this little bad boy. Stay tuned. That's right, I alluded at the end of the last episode I was going to tell you what the engine is for today, and that's the first thing I'm going to do because you've waited long enough. Now, I will be the first to admit I've not been massively inventive with this. I know I told you I was trying to find something like a turbo, so it needed to be like a 4-stroke. They were proving far too expensive and very big. I want to try and see if I could find some kind of small rotary. Again, the only ones I could find that were really usable, that weren't like RC ones, were for motorbikes. They're really expensive because, you know, rotary things. So in the end, I thought I'm going to go for something super cheap and then do something dumb to it because I don't have to worry too much. So I've got this, the old tried and tested 49cc 2-stroke. Now you can't turbo 2-strokes really, just from the way they work. I could go into it, but it is a little bit of black magic how 2-strokes actually operate anyway. But also, I figured I may as well go through my power adder number 2 that I wanted to try and do, and that's nitrous. I've got an idea for it. I'm pretty almost certain. Nope, I'm certain this is going to have nitrous on it at some point. So we're going to do that. So I'm going to chuck it in the frame and stuff in a minute, show you how it sits. Obviously this was an electric mini quad before, so fitting this on there I'm going to have to cut and shut and do some little engine mounts and stuff. But I've got a really cool idea for the exhaust. I've already ordered one that's meant for a mini moto, and I'm going to chop that about. But I'm going to spin it around and tell you, and then I'll explain some of the stuff I've already done, because past me a few days ago started working on this and I recorded it in the past, so I'll have to insert that in a minute. So as I think I might have alluded to in the last episode, just to tickle your fancy a little bit, this is obviously an electric one, so me mounting this engine is going to take a little bit more work than it would have done if I just got a petrol one in the first place, but let's not worry about that. Now, I have recorded a video how I did this, which I'll show you in a second, but I've essentially just cleaned up and sort of rebuilt the calipers. They're real simple, just like pull style one. New brake pads, everything's bolted back up, straight in some brackets, got the discs all cleaned up and done that. I've also done the same to the rear. So again, I straightened the bracket up, got everything fitting a little bit better, cleaned the disc up and fitted new brake pads. Now when it comes to doing the brake calipers on these, you'll be glad to know, like everything else on these things, it is super cheap and super simple. Now you could, if you wanted, go on eBay, buy a pair of these brand new with brake pads fitted in a few different colours for like £15. I've cheaped out because that's the whole point in this project. I paid £3 for 2 pairs of brake pads. I'm just going to tidy these up. There are 3 calipers, but 2 of the pads are actually okay. You literally just take off these 2 bolts here, take that out there. You make sure you keep this little retaining spring, which I'll explain in a second. And it's dead simple. So one set of the pads will sit in this side, they don't move, and the other pad sits in there. When this arm pushes, it just literally pushes out one pad, so essentially just pushes it from one side. It's like a non-floating disc. It doesn't clamp it from both sides. As with any generic part, obviously all these bikes, engines, brake calipers, most of it is all basically made in China. It's all basically the same stuff. You will find tiny little clearance differences. So these brake pads didn't quite fit in the calipers. I mean, a tiny little bit. So I just used a little flat file. Just put the brake pad on the workbench just there on the edge, and then just filed it very gently. It just means that it'll actually move in and out a little bit simpler. And then it's literally a case of putting this little clip in there like that. Sorry, it's a bit difficult for one hand, you'll have to take my word for it. This goes on there, and all that means is when the caliper pushes it in, this little spring just pushes it back out again to stop them from binding up. That is it. It is dead simple. So I'll get this one finished. I've already got the other 2 done. There's one there that I've already sorted out. The other one's already on the bike. We'll get these fitted, and then we'll put the back brake disc on, and all the brakes will be finished. Oh, and it is worth mentioning, these are sided. So one of them will fit on the right and one will fit on the left, depending on which way you fit it. But you'll be able to work it out easy enough. Which essentially means at least the frame itself is now ready to start accepting engines, and then obviously the controls for the brakes, the controls for the pedals, and all those kinds of things. And obviously now I don't have handlebars anymore, so there'll be no twist grips and brakes for that way. It's going to be a little bit more like a car, and I've got some Fiat bits that are going to be sprinkled on this to enable that to happen. We won't get into that too far yet. Let's go back to me in the past, where I'm now fitting things like the sprocket and some other little bits, see how I get on, and then we'll come back and carry on in a minute. But with buying this engine, I've reached a couple of problems, because one, as I just said, it's not actually made for this frame, so I need to make some engine brackets, not an issue. I need to get an exhaust. Again, I'm sure it's going to need a lot of chopping around, but I've got a cool idea for the exhaust. I don't want it to be normal. I've got an idea for this kind of Mario Kart style twin bad boy. But the other thing I found was, and I will show you, this is the chain from the old electric motor. It is not particularly long and it is really thick. I guess electric motors put out quite a lot of torque, so they need to be a nice strong chain. And this, I should have prepared for this a little bit better, shouldn't I? This is the sprocket that came off it. So it's quite a thick chain, so the sprocket's got quite big teeth between each one. Now that doesn't fit with the new, much longer and needed to be longer chain. Look at that skinny little thing. Now, you know, it's only time will tell how long this lasts, but we'll see. But it's a lot longer because before the electric motor actually mounted on the back swing arm itself, whereas the petrol motor needs to mount on the frame. So what I've done, by the little bit of Google research, just to figure out how to measure a chain and figure out which one it was, I've bought a new one. It was like £5. It's ridiculous. I just did a real rough measurement of the holes. It looks like they line up perfectly, and it's got a lot more teeth on it. I haven't bothered trying to figure out gearing and stuff. This might not be ideal for that little 50cc, but whatever. So for an extra £5, we are back in action. So I'm going to get this bolted up, get the original back brake disc bolted up. The plan being potentially to have this on a lever. I'm not saying I'm building a drift quad, but there's nothing wrong with being able to yank the lever and lock your rear brakes up sometimes for a bit of fun. But as with everything on this quad bike, this is not going to take me 2 seconds. Well, that didn't take long. I've already found a problem. So you will see, I haven't quite lined the holes up. The holes line up perfectly, but that centre hole is very slightly too small. So it won't actually go over the tiny little lip that's just on that side. So if I think my step drill's going to be up to it, I'll drill that out. Otherwise, it's going to be a bit of a long process to grind it. But I must admit, I didn't check it. I just bought it because the holes matched. So bear with me while I tackle that little bit of a weird problem. And, you know, normal service will resume. Now, this might seem like an obvious thing to say, but obviously I know what size hole that I need, and I need to put it into that piece there. So all I ever do is, especially if I'm using a step drill, I'll just drop it in there. And obviously that lets you see then what size you're going up to. So this one, if I get it in there straight, goes up to the second one from there. So again, I'll start drilling the other one up till I get to this point. Sometimes you'll need to flip the piece over because you can see it will start to try and then go to the next size down. But you'll see what I mean when I start doing it. And we'll give this a shot. But as with anything, take your time with this. And if you can, make sure you put on a lower ratchet setting. So if it does catch, it's not just going to snap your wrist. It's just going to do the old instead. Well, that's the plan. Right, that seemed to have worked a treat. Now this is completely toast now. The ratchet on it, just every time it touches anything, it just basically spins. So I'm afraid this one's going to be relegated to just drilling the old hole and doing some wire brushing and stuff. Sad time. So in the end, thankfully for me, my step drill fits in my little Dakka, which isn't ideal, but it did the job. And I did exactly what I thought I was going to have to. So I did one side like this, and I flipped it over, and did the other side, and then just kind of use the neck size up just to clean that edge, otherwise you'll have little metal burrs all the way around the edge. So at the moment, at least, I believe that is the right size. So I'm going to go test it out. I'm not going to worry about painting it just yet, because obviously with the rest of this, I need to paint all of the other frames and stuff like that. So I'll get everything hung up once we're done, get it all painted, stop everything rusting too bad. But let's face it, I don't think longevity is the thing we're going for with this project. Right, let's see if that's had the desired effect. Not holding out a massive amount of hope because I've measured nothing. Ah, that is so close. Right, the next hole up on the step drill is probably slightly too big, but given that the actual holes will line this up, even if the hole is a tiny bit too big, I'm not too worried. I'm going to basically try and do it as little as possible. But I'll do that, and I'll come back, we'll get it fitted. Third time's a charm. Now, it is getting a bit close to those bolt holes, but it's fine. It's fine. We're not building a Formula 1 car here. Hey, we're in. Right, 3 bolts, wheel back on. Okay, so the bolt holes are too small. Only very, 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 very slightly. I'm talking like less than a millimetre. So I'm going to very gently put those slightly bigger, because as you can see, we haven't got a lot of space before I just basically break through. But again, It's not the end of the world because all this is really doing is stopping it spinning, which it will do regardless, even if that was holes went straight through. So I'm not too concerned at the moment. And done. Only had to go out a tiny little bit, like I said, and you have to expect these things. You buy kind of cheap generic parts and also don't measure absolutely and completely 100% like I do, at least with this kind of stuff. But that's kind of the fun. It's kind of fun kind of getting your fabrication skills up to scratch and messing around with something that isn't too important. So now I can put this on and bolt the wheel up. Now the next logical step would be to put the engine in, which I'm kind of going to do. I'm just going to kind of rest it in there because obviously the engine has to go where the engine has to go. There's a little bit of movement, but not a lot. So, you know, within reason, we'll tackle that in a second. But I'm really keen just to lay out all the controls and stuff, show you some of the cool ideas I've got, just make sure everything sits and fits where it needs to go and that my ideas are going to work. And if they do, we're good to go. We can mount some of those up and then get the engine in place. I've got a nice simple idea for the engine brackets, which I hope should work pretty good. And then we'll take it from there. So I've got a few fit bits to sprinkle on here, which I'm going to dig out and show you. Now the first bit is a nice and simple. So the original quad bike had this twin cable basically for doing both the front discs. Now I'm actually going to use this. I managed to get it off the old handlebars with a little bit of difficulty, but the plan is that I'm actually going to bolt it onto here like this and just use it as a foot pedal. I don't think there's any reason to mess around with it too much, and I think the frame size is going to be roughly the same. If not, then I'll mod something on here to make this fit, but I'm hoping this is just going to bolt on there nice and easy, and that is done. And essentially what happens is these cables just go into the top of the caliper like this. When you press the foot pedal, it just pulls the caliper, so that will sort out the front of the brakes, and obviously then it'll be a bit more of a traditional left foot brake, right foot go. And as for the go, I've got a cool idea for that as well. Now the kit actually came with a twist type throttle, which I may end up being able to use, but obviously I can't use a twist throttle if I'm doing it with my foot. So when I got the Lemon, it had a load of random like bolt-on parts on it, some of them off of say Cento Schumachers. I don't recall from memory whether the Schumacher came with like a Sparco type pedal. I don't think it did, but if it did, cool, then this is a Schumacher pedal. If it didn't, it's just a Sparco one. So I figured if I'm going to use something on this quad, it may as well have come off of a Fiat. So this little pedal is going to go just like this. It's going to fit somewhere like that. So now what I may end up doing is either making the little bracket just attach this to the twist throttle and then mounting the twist throttle here. So essentially this is just twisting the throttle, or I'll knock up a little bracket that essentially does the same thing. As you press it, it just pulls the cable. It's only a simple cable pull, but that should be pretty good. So you can rest your foot on this really well and then just do this for the throttle. So obviously with quad bikes and stuff, there's a reason they have trigger throttles, because obviously as you're bouncing around you may accidentally press on this, but I mean this thing's never going to see off-road. It's only going to be messed around with, so that should work out pretty good as too. But I've got one last thing that I'm actually hoping I can make work on this just for fun, basically. And that is, where's it gone? This. So again, this was fitted to the Lemon when I first got it. It's just like a Richmond type over cover, call it whatever you want, but it's a handbrake cover, and obviously it's got the grip on it. It does kind of look like a drift handle. So my plan, if possible, is going to wire the rear caliper, or at least set up the rear caliper so the cable comes all the way to the front onto the same handle that actually triggered it before, the little grip, but have this somewhere around here so you can pull it and lock the rear brake. Now again, it's not a drift quad specifically, but hey, why not have it if you can? It's got a rear disc on it already, and I've got a cool handle. So fingers crossed, I'm going to be able to bend a little bit of bar, have this going down to about there, and have the handle mounted down here somewhere, and it's just essentially just pulls the grip. So it should be pretty sweet. Anyway, enough of me waffling on. Let's get this handle bolted on there, see if that's going to work, and then we'll start laying stuff out, see how we get on. But my exhaust still hasn't turned up. When it does, I'll show you that as well. Now hopefully this bolts straight up. I don't have to mess around with it too much, because I'm excited to get on to some of the other bits. This will just need a little bit of gentle persuasion. Well, the handle's gone over the actual frame, so now I just need to see whether this is going to tighten up enough that it's not going to move. So fingers crossed, we might get a little bit lucky here. Result. That is on there, solid. Now only time will tell whether that's enough movement. Now the front calipers on this, there's only a tiny little bit that it moves before the brake caliper touches. I've done that on purpose, but obviously we'll have to see. If that's not going to work, we may need to trim this bracket a little bit just to move this up. But at the moment, you know, it pulls it. Hopefully enough. So at the moment I'm going to call that a win, but we're just going to have to see. So I'll run these cables up around there. We won't worry about the location of them too much, but I'll just run one round to that side and bolt that in, one round to that side and bolt that in, and then we'll see if this stops it. Actually, I just had a thought, bit of a random comment, but I've been working on the lemon a little bit recently. Obviously, as you've seen in the last couple of episodes, I've been doing loads of stuff to it to make it run better. And now I'm chasing better performance, basically. I still think it's got more in it. So I took the air filter box off it to tweak the fuel pressure and stuff the other day. It sounds so good without an air filter on it. I obviously don't drive it like that. It was just a little run around the road, but it growls like a rally car. So I do genuinely wish I could run it without one. But I've got updates on that because it's definitely going in the right direction. Now that has actually worked a treat. It might need a little bit of fine fettling. I have adjusted it, so hopefully it does the same amount of braking either side. And I appreciate me moving this backwards and forwards now. It's not the same as this thing being at full tilt with a petrol engine on it. But if I just move it backwards and forwards. Now at the moment, these tyres are completely shot. So when you press brake, the wheel stops, but the tyre carries on spinning. So obviously this will get addressed at some point, but that has worked out absolutely perfect. Right, let's get this engine placed in there. Let's see how we're looking. It's going to be something along those lines. Now, from a quick line up, it needs to be as far over to the right as it can, so the chain lines up. Now I do know for sure that this little bracket here is suiting no purpose whatsoever. So I'm going to ditch that. I'm going to cut it off because it might be useful for the exhaust at some point later on. And what I might actually do is get rid of this battery box completely. So this is the battery box that was in there before. This doesn't really suit any real purpose. And I may be able to use some of these bits of bracket. But before I do that, I will just make sure that it's not going to come in handy having it there. But at the minute, it just looks rubbish. So I can probably just hack it off. But if we leave this in here for a sec, and then we'll line up a few other little things. And then it came with a little fuel tank. That's what I mean. For £49.50 I paid for this. Engine, the throttle, the kill switch, the little tiny little fuel tank. Look, they even left it so you can drill the holes. For the brackets, but my idea for this is going to go up in here. I don't know, it's not revolutionary because I'm assuming this is where it goes normally. So what I'm going to do is, at some point, I'm going to cut this bracket so that the actual lid for the fuel tank can fit up in there. Then I'm going to make a little hole bracket to go on here and make a little bracket for that top one. So it just goes like that. The question now though is, which thing do I do first? Because I don't want to have to redo stuff because I haven't thought about this very well. So the way I'm looking at it is the fuel tank has to go where the fuel tank has to go. There's not very much movement for that. It has to go up nice and high. So let's do that. I'm going to grab a pen, tape measure and the drill, a few other little bits, and we'll knock that little job out first. Well, after filming that little sequence, I actually remembered I had this in another place. I mean, it is very well used. I'm hoping it's going to have enough life left in it to cut this hole because I've used this for a lot of stuff. But check this out. If you undo this lid, this is perfect size. So I'm hoping that with the hole cut out of that square plate on there, this can just poke up through that hole. And because there is enough gap, I hope, between the lid and the tank for the metal to go, that this lid will still seal properly. Happy days. Things seem to be going my way a little bit today. Now there's a hole here, and obviously normally you have a pilot hole for these things. So I'm hoping that actually I can steal that just to do like a kind of half circle in this, because when I actually line the tank up, if I tip it back far enough that I can bolt it to here, the filler neck comes to about there. So I reckon that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to half hole this, try and get this up and as high as I possibly can. It may not work, it may work, but let's give it a shot. It did work. Worked a treat. I almost forgot my own advice. Remember, whenever you're doing anything with steel, whether you're drilling it or cutting it, generally speaking, if you go slow, it will actually cut it faster. I started putting this on a little bit too fast and it was smoky and not really doing much. So I've calmed it down. I mean, this is pretty blunt anyway, and do it really nice and slow, and it will just slowly chew its way through. Job done. Now, it might make me sound like a bit of an old man when I keep repeating these things, because not all of you are watching this are new to this, or young, or whatever, clueless. But always wear ear defenders. Remember, people, you can't replace your hearing. Look at that. worked a treat. Now obviously all I've basically done here is created a really nice razor blade. So I am going to get a file or something in a minute, maybe the Dremel, just round all that off because, you know, you never know. But let's grab the tank. If I've done anything, because I haven't measured this really properly, it should hopefully set up there a tree. Look at that. It's almost like I meant it. Check that out. And obviously that's holding itself in at the moment. I can't leave it like that, obviously. It needs a bracket. The only thing I needed to do though, as you can see, this goes up at an angle, so it was stopping the actual lid, the top going on. So what I did is get an extension, put it through the wheel like that, let's get on there, give it a few light taps of this bad boy, just to basically flatten that off. Done. And that's going to be it for part 3. I'm trying to keep the episodes short and snappy. So in the next episode, we're going to be getting the engine and the exhaust will be here by then. So fingers crossed, we'll have the engine mounted and start working on the exhaust to try and get the idea for that. It's going to take a little bit of work for it to look as cool as I want. We're really starting to get to the business end now. It was always going to take a little bit of time to get it sort of initially set up. Now we're going to start making it cool. So if you're enjoying the series, don't forget to like it. If this is the first one you've managed to grab, go back and watch part 1 and 2. They were really cool as well. But until then, until the next episode, I will see you then. Things are coming thick and fast. I've got some more updates coming about other new cars.